All right, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Patsy, and welcome everyone to the last session for the last day. Although we do have that restorative yoga session in just a moment when we're done today. But thank you for joining us at TIF 2.0, which is transitioning into the future.
That's
As
right.
we
And
get,
we're
go
asking
ahead, Steph.
I know a lot of you are already doing this, to just put your name and maybe how many years you've been in adult ed in the chat. We were asking about years because it would help us a little bit to know who's newer to ABE in Minnesota and maybe who's been around for a while, about how deep we need to go into the background of some of these terms and initiatives and things like that. So we're seeing a variety. We've got some seasoned folks here, and then a few newer folks, but it looks like a lot of you have been around for quite a while. So thanks for doing that. We really appreciate it. And we're so excited to have everyone joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Yes, welcome all.
All right, so Heather and I often work together, and I'm excited that we're working together on this new initiative, which involves updating the TIF. My name is Stephanie Summers, and I'm the ACES coordinator, and I work for Minneapolis Public Schools Adult Education.
I like to say that Stephanie is our ace in the hole for ACEs and TIF things related all around Atlas. I had to get that one line in there. She's our ace in the hole, and I do work with Stephanie both in Minneapolis Adult Ed. I'm the distance learning coordinator, and I'm an adult education instructor. Specifically, I'm working at an HSE level reading class right now, and then I do work on the adult career pathways coordination work with Atlas.
Thanks, Heather. And maybe we should say, so I am going into what I think is my 17th year working in adult education. And Heather, I know you're just a couple years beyond me, right? Are you 20, 21?
I'm entering next week. I will enter into my 23rd year, just like some of my colleagues here.
Absolutely. All right. So yes, Heather said before we started, I'm gonna have to use this joke I just came up with and call you our ace in the hole. Thanks, Teresa. So we have just a couple of objectives for today's session because it will be fairly short. So our main thing we'd like to do today is just give you a brief overview of the TIF project and the updates that we plan to make, some of which are in the works, and so, I mean, they're all in the works, some of which are finished and some of which will be coming later this fall and winter. And then we'll also be facilitating some discussion around ACEs TIF skills, and we'll get started with that in just a minute. And then at the end of this session, Heather's going to share with you this great document, and we're hoping that you will provide us with a little bit of input about ways that we could make ACEs TIF more useful for you. So we're going to be talking about the ACEs website and the resource library and maybe the document itself. And just we're looking for ways that if you had, if you ran the world, what would be a way to make these materials more usable, more user-friendly? So that'll be coming at the end. Okay.
Yeah, and I like how you presented that, Stephanie, because it is a session so that we want to get your input. ACEs TIF is not just some people sitting around in a room with the doors closed deciding on this work. It comes from all of the knowledge that you all are sharing with your number of years of experience. So let's do some chatting right now. We are going to ask you to use the chat box to make sure you're engaged, but also it's a way for us to collect this information at the end of our session and incorporate it into the TIF 2.0 work. So in the chat box, please tell us which ACEs TIF category is your favorite one to integrate into your classroom activities and why. You can see we list those 6 TIF categories. We have effective communication. If you want, you could just put a number 1 or EC in the chat. We have learning strategies. You could put the number 2 or LS in the chat. Critical thinking is 3. You could put 3 or CT. Self-manage it at SM or number 4. And developing a future pathway is number 5 or DFP. And navigating systems is number 6. We've got some chat coming through, don't we, Stephanie?
Yes, I'm typing up myself here. I'm putting something in about my favorite.
I see some learning strategies, number 2.
Yeah, there's
independent
several learning strategies. So navigating
Yeah.
systems, more in critical thinking. Pretty good spread, although I think learning strategies might be taking the lead here.
Yeah, Teresa, thank you for pointing out that DFP and CT because everyone needs to be thinking about their future. Exactly.
Yeah. 3 and 5. Yep.
Oh, and I like how Karen Walters, a manager, talking about because navigating systems is important because it can be used by more than just teachers in the classroom. And thank you for bringing that lens that we need to be incorporating with the TIF 2.0. It's not just for teachers, it's for everyone.
Mhm. Yeah, and I like that Krista pointed out, I know other people said this too, a lot of these skills really do apply to multiple areas of people's lives. So that's certainly true of self-management. I think that's true of navigating systems. I think it's true of effective communication. And for me, a lot of these skills, I feel like really bubbled up to the top during the pandemic. And when we were trying to get our learners joining us for virtual classes, navigating all kinds of systems, maybe the healthcare system, maybe the unemployment system, maybe applying for new jobs, maybe applying for medical benefits. And so I really see so many ways in which these we interact with these skills every day of our lives.
Yeah. And Stephanie, I'd like to remind participants that you could go back into Atlas and look under ACES. You did some fantastic webinars interviewing students on their self-management skills during the pandemic. I thought that was just ideal, and go back and watch those webinars. It's really great to hear it from our learners.
Yes, thanks, Heather. Yeah, I think that webinar is available on the Minnesota Professional Development YouTube channel for sure.
All right.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it is hard to choose just one, but this was just kind of a way, especially for anyone who's maybe not as familiar with ACES TIF, just to get thinking about some of the skills. I think it's great to read some of my colleagues' reasonings behind why they would choose one as a favorite. Yeah, it's great to get these different perspectives. That's right, Callie. All right. Thank you all for sharing. And now we'll just move into what this project is about, the vision and the timeline.
So the TIF 2.0 project vision is the ACES TIF, which is the Transitions Integration Framework, is just one of the 3 sets of Minnesota ABE content standards. And it's over 10 years since we first came out with the TIF. It's grown into a nationally recognized transitions framework. There are other states that use the Minnesota-made ACES TIF as their employability skills framework, and it has influenced, should be work done around Minnesota and across the United States. So maybe it has influenced the world, but I'm going to suggest maybe more in Minnesota and the US.
World domination to come. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ACES TIF.
All right, so some of the objectives for the revamp, the TIF 2.0, were to adjust the ACES TIF skills and activities to better align with current teaching context, technological realities, and priorities in the field. We know that nothing stays the same forever, and that's certainly true in education, and we are not dealing with the same landscape that we were back in 2013, 2012, when this project started. So we felt like it was important to look at it with fresh eyes and think about how we could give it an update for everything that's going on now. One of those things is to include a more deliberate focus on two things that are very important in our field right now. One of them is diversity, equity, and inclusion, often called DEI, which we know is a really big deal in on college campuses, in K-12 education, in workplace discussions, and also in the field of ABE. And then also social and emotional learning, or SEL, which I know Wendy Sweeney gave a great presentation on earlier this morning. So those two perspectives we want to make sure to intentionally include in the work that we're doing now. We also want to make sure that we are linking ACES TIF to some of the other important work going on in ABE, including adult diploma. Anyone involved with diploma knows that one of the 5 domains is heavily linked to ACES, and that students have to show competency in several areas, developing a future pathway, navigating systems, in order to submit that diploma portfolio. And then IET. And so we know that there's a lot of work and a huge focus on that here in Minnesota and at the national level. And so we want to make it more clear to everyone who maybe doesn't deal with these things on a daily basis, how ACES and TIF can support those who are doing that kind of work. So we are updating our sample lesson plans. One of the big things we're keeping in mind when we do that is that classes now are not always face-to-face. There's blended learning, there's hybrid learning, there's online learning. And we're also trying to include some new tools, like some checklists and self-assessments that teachers will have access to with the new lesson plans.
Yeah, Stephanie, I'm excited to see our final product. Again, it's going to be out into the future, but you all can help contribute. And I feel that you as instructors as well as managers would like to have some of these updated documents. We came up with a timeline here. We formed a TIF 2.0 advisory team. We're reviewing current ACES TIF lesson plans that were developed way back in 2013. We want to be providing the overview of the project and some examples, which is today at Summer Institute. We'll provide more in-depth information about updated lesson planning templates and such at our fall regional events that will be coming up in person, you all, in both the South and the North. And then we'll finalize and post on the website by the end of 2022. We hope to then, from that information, develop a webinar series around ACES TIF 2.0, and that will be in the winter and spring. So you will be updated along the way, and look for updates in the MNABE Connect newsletter, as well as on the TIF ACES website.
And we just feel like it's really important to let everyone know that this is not work that we are doing alone. We have put together a really amazing advisory team. We are so lucky to be working with these talented, dedicated individuals from across the state. So we've got Teresa Luther Dolan and Terry Ferris. I know both of them are on the webinar today with us. We've got C. Mualeski from down in the Marshall area. We've got Elizabeth Bennett from here in the Metro, Dan Brewski. We've got Matt Demmer, who works in Moorhead. We've got Jamie Kreil, Dr. Jamie Kreil, who works here in the Metro. And then Callie Pelham, who's from the St. Cloud area. And all of these people are helping us. We met with them in July. We're meeting again in September, and then we'll have a final meeting in December. And they have really been invaluable. The first task was to review those lessons, those sample lessons that were put together, as Heather mentioned, back in 2013, and part of the original training for this, for the ACES project. And the input that they gave us about ideas for making updates and changes has just been incredible. So Heather and I know Patsy as well, have been blown away by the the amount of attention and time that everyone has given this project so far. So we are really, really fortunate to be working with such great leaders.
Yeah, Stephanie, and just to point out, we have folks from large programs. We have folks from urban programs, as well as smaller programs in greater Minnesota, from the north, south, east, west. We have single room schoolhouse settings, as well as a manager involved in this work. So we want to make sure it brings in voices and a lens from all areas of adult education.
Okay, so we wanted to, again, bring people into the conversation using that chat box. So we have 2 questions here, and please just pick one of them, the one that you would more like to answer. The first question is, what are the 3 sets of content standards in Minnesota ABE, and why do we have them? Or if you prefer, please respond to what is meant by transition skills and why are they important? And we'll just take 1 or 2 minutes to have people respond in the chat. We are interested in getting people's thoughts here. So guys, it's great to say 1 or 2, but it's actually a question. So if you answer question 1, what would your answer be? And if you answer question 2, what would your answer be?
Yeah, so, and we are not keeping score. So if perhaps you don't know all 3 content standards, it's a great time for you all to be learning them. But also this idea of transitions, that's what it is, the transitions integration framework. So what do we mean about transitions?
Yeah, so it looks like no big deal. Yeah, clearly we didn't get that. That was our bad, not to explain it more clearly. So we see quite a few people know the answer to number 1, CCRS, ACES, TIF, and North Star Digital Literacy. Those are our 3 sets of content standards. Okay. And Terry says a transition skill is something that helps you to move between educational levels and between school and work. Yeah, often something that helps you to transition or advance to your next step or your next goal. And that's also what Amy says, transitioning to further education or to career pathways. Callie says, I think of transition skills as real world skills used for life and work. I love that we are keeping the end in mind. What do we want our students to know as they transition out of our educational environment? Wonderful. Let's see here. Karen, as far as the question 1 and the 3 sets of content standards, she says these standards provide a framework for the entire system to align instruction and assure that students learn what will get them jobs and move them to college. Exactly. So we have these 3 sets of content standards to keep ourselves accountable and our students on track, because we know that we need the academic skills, the professional skills, and the digital literacy skills to reach those goals. Yeah, great. Exactly. It spells out the skills that students need. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for participating here.
Yeah, and for those of you who might be new to adult education, take note of those contents and standards, as well as what we mean by transitions. We use so many acronyms, but just to help you more experienced folks, you're sharing with the newer folks in adult education.
Okay, and here is a graphic that we have shared many, many times. We affectionately call it the peace sign. We've used this as a planning tool before. So when we think about a lesson or we think about a unit of instruction, we do want to make sure that we're bringing these 3 sets of standards into our planning. And for anyone who might need more information, we've put links here, all of the information about CCRS and ACES TIF. These are available on the Atlas website, of course. And then the North Star Digital Literacy Skills, those are available on the North Star website. You can find the standards, you can find the frameworks and supporting resources if you follow those links.
And the links are going to be embedded within the PDF of our slides here from this session, and you can find those within the schedule document. So some of you might be asking, why do we need so many standards? I just want to teach this one thing, Stephanie. I just want to teach grammar. But we know that our students just don't need grammar. We know that our adult learners and students, they have identifiable gaps in their academic knowledge and skills. And many times they're lacking some of the professional skills, especially if they're ELs coming from another country. Our United States workplace has different learning styles and working styles than perhaps in other countries. So it's important that we bring that into our classroom environment. Organization, self-monitoring, active listening, asking questions, all of those TIF skills are really important. And the skills in the TIF help our learners learn and practice those strategies that they need to be successful independent learners. And that's how they transition into that workplace or into that educational environment. And you were going to say?
I was just going to say, yeah. So if you're a person who likes metaphors, or you kind of think in pictures, the image here of scaffolding. So the ACES TIF sort of provides the scaffolds and the frame, the skills that underpin the heavy academic lifting that is needed for the CCRS. And so, for example, without good learning strategies or without self-management, it is difficult for a student to be able to really be successful when they get into the reading and the math and the more academic content. So we hope that's clear to everyone. And there is work being done to show how these standards align. For example, the North Star Digital Literacy Project recently put together some crosswalk documents. I think those came out within the past year or so. And they are available on the North Star website that show you, they outline where within the North Star curriculum ACES skills, and I believe also CCRS skills, do intersect.
Yeah, they have a great alignment document.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we have gone over this a little bit, but just to make sure, ACES stands for Academic, Career, and Employability Skills. This initiative did start back in 2012, 2013. And ACES is the name of the initiative project, and the TIF, the Transition Integration Framework, is the name of the document. So there are two things that kind of go together. The purpose of ACES was to ensure that ABE programs are able to provide effective contextualized instruction, integrating post-secondary education and training readiness, employability skills, and career readiness at all levels. And I think, especially at the time when this first started, it was the at all levels part that was a little bit new. And the idea that you should be teaching these skills from the beginning levels of ABE, ELL instruction, and that we can't wait until a student is, at that higher level, the advanced level, to start thinking about how we're going to help them reach their transition goals. We need to be building those skills all along the way, and that in fact we can practice all of these skills even with our most beginning level students.
Exactly, Stephanie. And the lessons and lesson plans and templates that are currently within ACES TIF still can be used, but we will be updating and refreshing these so that then we can show even better how it works at all levels.
Mm-hmm.
This comes from the TIF. The Complete TIF, which you can find at the Atlas website, has categories and the definitions for each category. There are skills listed as well as sub-skills. It gets pretty in detail, and there's sample activities, which can be very simple to the more complex, depending on where your class and your learners fit. There's sample technology ideas to practice skills, ideas how to contextualize for either a community, a school, or a workplace setting. Again, this was all developed in 2013, and we are going to be updating this to include more DEI and SEL. Did you want to say anything else about the current TIF, Stephanie, that's under your work that you do with Atlas?
No, just I think it's important, and that's why we put it in the big purple box here to point out, because I know people sometimes feel like things are always changing, and we want to make it clear that the TIF categories are not changing. The skills and the sub-skills will remain the same. A big part of this work is to update the materials and to provide more support, but we feel like we did a pretty good job of identifying those skills and sub-skills and identifying the categories when we started. And those things are consistent with other transition frameworks. And so we're not changing that. So you don't have to worry about, learning a bunch of new categories or anything. This is just to enhance and improve the work that we are doing. And thanks, Lindsay. I know Lindsay just finished the ACES TIF Foundation course in Schoology, and I really appreciate that shout out. That is a course that is available. It's self-paced, you self-enroll. And for anyone who is new, it does kind of walk you through the 6 categories and help to give a better understanding of the categories and skills, or excuse me, the skills and sub-skills within each category, available on Schoology.
Great, and I'm so happy that you're working on that. And we, as part of the TIF 2.0, we came up with a new lesson plan template that I think might be easy for you all to integrate into your current lesson planning. Do you want to walk us through this, Stephanie?
Sure, and I know Heather's going to share a link, and if you'd like to see the whole thing, this screenshot is just of the first page. It does have a little bit more, so we'll share that. We wanted to create a lesson plan template that we think reflects what best practices in lesson planning would look like right now in 2022. Is Schoology now called something else? No, Carol, Schoology is still called Schoology. However, a lot of the information that used to be on Schoology for ABE practitioners has migrated over to something called Mighty Network. So that's where some of the group conversations now happen, but the courses, the ACES TIF Foundations course and the CCRS Foundations course, those are still on Schoology. Oh, Lindsay says Power School. I see. Power School, I think, is the overarching maybe name, but I still access it by looking up Schoology. Heather,
Yeah, I think either Power School purchased Schoology or they changed their name. Schoology is still the platform, but the company is called Power School. But if you want to take that foundations course, go into Schoology. And thank you for sharing that. Lindsay and Patsy also shared the link so that you all can look at this lesson plan template with us.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Carol. I think I look at it all the time and I probably didn't even register that the name had changed. So thank you. That would be probably confusing for others also. So this template, the header information, we would have we'll be including the category at the top, and then we'll be including information about the focus or purpose of the lesson. So as an example, I know in one of the original lessons, it focused on reading maps and sort of navigating around the community. So then that would be explained there under focus or purpose of lessons to help students, learn how to use prepositions and learn how to talk about, going around town, for example. Then we'll include some information about background and rationale. Why is the content in this lesson important? What course and setting, for example, on the NRS level. So we like to use NRS level because that's more consistent than just saying ELL 1 or ELL 2. And the approximate time needed to complete the lesson. So that would be included as header information. Then we have our 3 sets of standards, and any standards that are specifically addressed in the lesson would be included there. We've also included space for putting learning objectives or line of inquiry if this is part of maybe a larger unit. The things that are, really new, we've got some key considerations. We'll be including ideas about how to specifically be mindful of diversity and inclusion and social emotional learning. We will be putting together some documents that will be sort of consistently shared, some resources for both of those. And then when it comes to a particular lesson, if there's something specific to that lesson that we'd like to include, we will add those there. And then accommodations and adaptations, what kind of a delivery format, or how could this be adapted for virtual learning versus in-person, and differentiation strategies as well. And then after all of that, the lesson plan just sort of moves into a typical lesson plan with the warm-up, introduction, guided practice, independent practice, and extension or assessment at the end. And then I know at the end of the template, there's a section of notes for teachers. So if you try out a lesson and you yourself, after trying it, have some ideas for maybe specific resources that you used or adaptations that you made, there's a space at the end of the template for you to add those. And so we're hoping that this is a bit of a more user-friendly and easier to follow lesson plan. It's also a little more consistent, although not exactly the same as the CCRS lesson plan. So if you're familiar with using that format, this might be similar for you. And so we will be sharing at Fall Regional some completed lesson plan templates. And we just wanted to share what that format will look like. And if anyone has any comments or questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat.
And Stephanie, I just want to calm any fears like, oh my gosh, do I have to do a lesson plan template? No, but this can help support you. It's kind of like the scaffolding. We want to scaffold and support some of our newer teachers or someone moving from K-12 to adult ed, so that you are thinking about your lesson planning in a deliberate way. So you do not have to use this template. However, I find any tool is a useful tool in my lesson planning.
Yes, and Amy says this is great. I know this is TIF focused, but mentioning key shift in the CCR standard heading might be a helpful prompt. That is certainly something that we could think about adding. Yeah, for people who would like to include that information. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, and I know that you're taking notes already, Stephanie. This is how we work.
Yep, Heather
Thanks
knows
for
me.
all.
Got my pen in hand. Yep, absolutely.
So as you noticed on that lesson plan that, again, Patsy shared the link in the chat, there are some key terms that are defined. I'm not going to read for you, but here is the definition of diversity. So I'll have you take a moment to reflect on this. There is a link within our slide deck at the bottom lower right. You can see that link is available within the PDF. If you want more background and more information about what we mean by diversity. And that is part of the DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And these definitions come from the University of Michigan. I'll move us along. Here's what we mean by equity. All right, so when we think of DEI, we've got diversity, now we've got equity. I'll give you a moment to read. And again, this comes from the University of Michigan. And I'll move us along with the idea of inclusion. Again, we went to a university source. As Stephanie pointed out, many universities are focused on DEI. We also need to be focused on it as our students transition into those educational settings. Here, I'll allow you to read what we mean by inclusion. Just
And
for the sake of time, I might move us along, Stephanie.
well, actually, Heather,
All
would
right.
it be okay if I made a quick comment?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, thanks. So for anyone who might be keeping up with the ABE Connect newsletter this summer, I recently shared a resource that's sort of an example of what we mean by specifically looking for resources that would bring some DEI into the classroom. And that resource I'm talking about was called A Walk in Their Shoes, or maybe A Walk in My Shoes. And it was a project that was put together to highlight stories of first-generation college students. And so it is a video series. There are 5 videos that you can watch, and they are all fairly short, about 5 minutes. And it's an opportunity for students to hear from first-generation college students. They have different struggles, different experiences. And when we share the resource as part of our lesson plans, we also will be including sort of some discussion, like a discussion guide. So ways that students could either connect by talking or doing some reflective writing. And that is an example of what we mean when we say we are trying to intentionally think more about ways. A big part of inclusion is helping everyone to see themselves, see their place, see their seat at the table in spaces where they have not always been represented or felt welcome. And so by including these types of resources, it is our hope that we're bringing more of that into our classrooms. Yes, Tamara.
Yeah, that was a great article, Stephanie. I think it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago on the MN ABE Connect. Thank you for pointing that out. And then within the template, do you want to talk about SEL?
Yeah, and again, I think if anyone attended Wendy Sweeney's session this morning, she also talked about social emotional learning and its importance. And one of the things that she talked about was how routines are really, really important, because when your brain is always sort of unsure what's going to come next. So her session had to do with just sort of uncertainty and how we live in these uncertain times. We've been living through a lot of uncertainty recently, and that really can sort of prohibit our brains from taking in and processing information as well as it should. And so making sure that our students, we have some strong routines in our classroom, which is a big part of TIF. ACES TIF is really helpful for social emotional learning. And I know Wendy talked about the CASEL website, and that's where this definition comes from. So again, I won't read the definition, but as Heather just put out in the chat, some of the work that we'll be doing with our TIF 2.0 advisory team is putting together some routines for each of the TIF categories that people will be able to download and use, just like they can the lesson plans.
Yeah, so again, the link to CASEL will be in our PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm. So we know that we have just a few minutes left, but we were hoping people might be able to answer one of these questions. So what is an example of a way that you try to bring the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion into your classroom? Or an example of a way that you bring social and emotional learning into your classroom. So if you have a quick idea for one or the other of those and you wanted to share it in the chat, it's great to get ideas from everyone. So if you had one quick thing that you try to do with your students to work on DEI, or one thing you do for SEL. And a mood meter was one of the things that I believe Wendy talked about, Heather. Yeah, using those mood meters or emotion wheels to kind of check in with students and give them an opportunity to talk about how they're feeling. Tamara says she uses readings from journeys, which is a great idea. Those stories all come from our adult learners here in Minnesota, and those would be a great way to bring some diverse voices into the classroom. That's great. For anyone who doesn't know, Journeys is that anthology of adult student writing that is published every year by Literacy Minnesota. Danelle says this is not her idea, but a teacher in St. Cloud does a bell ringer type activity where students fill in a sheet with the weather and their mood for the day. Yeah, actually, I think that's kind of a neat idea. I know it's actually kind of common in our culture to sort of equate mood with weather. And so that's a clever idea to put those together. And I agree, especially for lower level students. And keeping a space open, yeah, maybe starting the day where students have an opportunity to share something that's going on in their lives. Yeah, so Carol says she talks a lot about metacognition and how a little anxiety helps to keep us sharp and attentive, but when it gets to be too much, we need to relax and work on some relaxation strategies. That's great. Yep, and that's a good one too. So talking about personal life stories and then taking those stories and using them as reading activities for the class. That's a great idea, Amy. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I know because of time, we do need to move on because we have one other thing we wanted to share with you.
And we're going to share with you another space, and this can be taking what you put in the chat and you can put it into this document. But we have a live Google Doc that's open for all of you to add some ideas, resources, strategies, supporting materials that you would like to see in the TIF 2.0. This is your chance to say, hey, this is what I want. We're going to listen to you and try to deliver. But you could also be sharing some ideas and strategies that you could be responsible for. So I'm going to take a moment to go to this live document that Patsy shared in the chat. And if we take a look, this is the live document. I can see some people typing. This document will stay open after today's session. So if you're someone who needs a little time to process and think about what you'd like to see in TIF 2.0, please keep this open in your tab and add to it along the way. I know we're all, or many of us are going back to school in the next few weeks, and we're hoping that you can be thinking about this as you plan maybe for your quarter, your semester, your school year. We'd like to hear from you. Yeah, I see Krista is talking about a lot of community building, especially early on. Yeah, Krista, when we go back to school next week, or in 3 weeks, we'll be doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we know these sessions were short today, but if you have a minute, maybe, right now while it's on your mind, if you could put something in here, we will have access to this document. And we really do, this is our way of kind of crowdsourcing ideas for how to improve ACES TIF. We would love to incorporate some of your ideas. Yeah, so you can write on it later today, tomorrow, whenever an idea comes your way. We'd love to hear about it. And thanks to those folks who are in there right now. Okay.
Yeah, and we just want to make sure we're ending on time, right?
Yes. So with that, we want to thank you so much for being here. And even though we are thinking about back to school, we do know there's a little bit of summer left. We hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. And we do hope to see you at an ACES TIF session this fall. We will have sessions at the South Fall Regional, which will be in Mankato in late September, and at the North Fall Regional in Walker in October. Again, we plan to be talking more about how to use that new template and sharing some of our updated lesson plans at those sessions. And if there was something else that you'd like us to talk about, something more, that's also a note you could make on that document, because we are going to be planning for the South and the North Fall Regional, as well as for those webinars that will be coming out later this year. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and thanks for coming to the last session of the Great Summer Institute 2022.
And rumor has it we'll be together in person next year. Andy Alvey, what you got for us?
Yes, hopefully, yes, we are. The committee is planning on that. Do note that there is a restorative movement after this at 3 o'clock, if you would like to join in on that. Just a nice way to kind of wind your day down.
Love it. I am going to stop the recording here, but stick around if you have other questions for Stephanie, Heather, or Andy.